The silence of deep space was not supposed to break. But on the cold edge of Earth's orbit, in the control deck of listening station K7, a young technician named Raynor sat frozen. His hands hovered above his console, eyes locked on the screen. In front of him, at first he thought it was a glitch, just static, maybe some leftover solar flare residue. But then the sound came again, clearer this time. It wasn't just static. It was a voice, a real voice. It crackled through the speakers, old and tired, but unmistakably alien. The voice trembled with fear, pain, and something deeper, something, like surrender. It repeated the same phrase again and again. They are burning us. We are losing everything. Please help us. The message looped every 13 minutes, carried on a forgotten frequency used only by ancient deep-range probes. No origin ID, no coordinates, just raw emotion, wrapped in an old language that auto-translation barely recognized. A signal sent by someone too desperate to care if anyone was listening. Within 2 hours, Earth's Space Defense Council had the signal under full lock. Media blackout. All communication channels scrambled. Only a select few were allowed access. Among them was Admiral Elias Knox, commander of the Earth Defense Coalition's Titan Vanguard fleet. A man who had spent his life in silence, never smiling, never forgetting. When he heard the signal, he didn't react. He simply nodded, stood up from his war room chair, and said one word: deploy. No one questioned his order. Earth had grown powerful over the last decades. The fleet that orbited the planet was the most advanced in human history. Dozens of warships, cruisers, drone carriers, all armed with weapons that could melt moons. And this time, they were not defending Earth. They were answering a call. As preparations began, others started to ask questions. People like Dr. Myra Solon, a xenolinguist who worked in the science division of the fleet. She wasn't a soldier, she was a listener. And what she heard in the voice was not just panic, was regret as the fleet launched. Myra sat alone in her quarters aboard the EDS Eclipse, listening to the signal over and over. The words were ancient, yes, but the meaning behind them was not just a plea for help. It was a warning. She slowed the transmission, layered it over itself, adjusted for cosmic delay. And hidden in the final line, she heard something else, something darker. They will come again. Mercy will kill us all. The translation was rough, but the message was clear. Whoever had sent the signal didn't want Earth's firepower. They were terrified of it. The journey took 4 days at full warp. The destination was uncharted space beyond the known borders of Varelian Territoria, long-forgotten region once, believed to be dead. As the Titan Vanguard approached the coordinates, the stars began to look different. Colder, dimmer. The planet that came into view was no paradise. It was a grave, once lush and golden. Now it was blackened, its oceans boiled into clouds, its cities reduced to glass craters. And above it, drifting like ghosts, were the remains of the Varelian fleet. Hundreds of alien ships, shattered and floating, their power cores long dead. There was no battle here, only execution. Admiral Knox ordered a full scan. Survivors were detected small pockets of life buried deep underground. The command was swift. Initiate contact, establish control, offer aid, prepare for resistance. But the moment Earth's landing teams descended, something strange happened. The Varelians, those few who remained alive, didn't attack. They didn't flee. They fell to their knees. One of them, a tall, pale-skinned elder with hollow eyes, looked directly into the face of the lead commander and whispered, "Why? Why did you come again?" That one question stopped everything. The transmission they had heard was real, but it wasn't new. It had been sent long ago, hundreds of years back, maybe more. Somehow, it had taken all that time to reach Earth. And now that Earth had answered, it had walked into a memory older than it realized. Mira, watching the ground feed from orbit, began to panic. She reviewed Varelian history, old treaties, extinct dialects, and she found something buried deep references to a visitor, a destroyer, a blue flame from the east. Not another alien empire. Not some space anomaly. Earth had been here before. Not in diplomacy. Not in peace. In fire. Back in the ruins, the variants began chanting a phrase over and over. Their voices were cracked, but their meaning was sharp. Mercy has returned. We will burn again. And in the skies above, the Titan vanguard watched. They had come to help, but they had arrived not as saviors. They had arrived as ghosts of destruction. The First Order came before the dust, had even settled on Varelia's blackened surface. Admiral Elias Knox stood at the command bridge of the EDS Vindicator, hands behind his back, eyes sharp, unblinking. The images streaming from the ground showed Varelian survivors huddled in burned-out bunkers, their eyes wide with fear. Their mouths repeating the same phrase, "Mercy has returned. We will burn again." Knox said nothing. He didn't need to. The officers around him understood the look on his face. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. It was an occupation. The fleet spread out in perfect formation, Earth's largest. Warships Vindicator, Solar Rain, Titan's Wake Orbit, the broken planet like wolves around a dying deer. Fighters dropped into the atmosphere, not with weapons drawn, but with scanners, troops, and heavy equipment. Outposts were deployed. Tents set up, medical drones activated. Earth wanted control, but it wanted the appearance of compassion. Aid first, force later was the spoken doctrine. But the steel behind that kindness was impossible to miss. Down below, the survivors didn't celebrate. They didn't run into Earth's arms. They stared with empty eyes, flinched at every sound, and whispered to one another in ancient tongues. Dr. Mira Solon watched from the research deck of the EDS Eclipse. Her face pale. The more she listened to their language, the clearer it became. The signal wasn't a request for help. It was a warning, a desperate cry to not come, to leave them be. But Earth had come anyway. Admiral Knox dismissed her findings. "The only truth I care about," he said, his voice low and sharp, "is that an enemy burned this world, and Earth will make sure it never happens again." "But what if we're the enemy?" Mar asked. He turned to her slowly. "Then it's better we win." The next orders were issued under tight encryption. All Varelian technologies were to be secured. Survivors were to be contained. Any structure deemed of interest was to be analyzed for defense purposes. The words were wrapped in scientific language. But Myra could see the truth. The fleet wasn't investigating, it was harvesting. The Varelians began resisting. Quietly, at first refusing scans, blocking drones, shielding children. But Earth soldiers, trained for much worse, responded without hesitation. They didn't shoot, they didn't threaten. They simply pressed harder. One city's ruins were collapsed by controlled detonations after local survivors tried to wall them off. For safety, the report said. Knox approved it personally. On the 7th day, a hidden structure was found beneath the ash of a collapsed temple. It wasn't a weapon. It was a beacon pulsing with faint light. Mira and her team were the first to enter. Inside, she saw symbols etched into the walls. Spiral stars, eyes without faces, ships burning as they fell into darkness. And then, on one central wall, a crude drawing of a planet, blue, white, green dot Earth, but it wasn't painted as a savior. It was surrounded by flame. Mira's hands trembled. She uploaded the image to the mainframe and ran a scan. The translation came back with one simple line: "The planet that forgot." Something inside her shifted. The deeper she looked into Varelian records, the clearer it became. Centuries ago, long before Earth had reached for the stars, one of its first deep probes had crashed on this very world. Not a warship, just a drone. But something inside that drone, some virus, some AI, something dark, had infected the world's systems. The Varelians had fought to contain it. They'd destroyed cities to stop it. And when they finally silenced the infection, sent out a warning: stay away. But Earth had never received it, until now. And now, believing it was a cry for help. Earth had returned with fire, with ships, with orders to dominate. The infection was gone. But the memory remained. That night, a group of virulents, detonated an EMP bomb inside one of Earth's supply camps. No deaths, just darkness. Just a message. We remember, Knox responded without hesitation. A squadron was deployed to that zone. Warning shots were fired. Buildings were leveled. Survivors were relocated under force. The operation was labeled Stabilization Procedure 1. Mira begged him to stop. She showed him the records. She showed him the truth. Knox stared at the images of the beacon, the translation, the proof that Earth's return had only reopened old wounds. But he simply shook his head. You think the galaxy cares about what's fair? He asked. You think they'll give us peace because we apologize? We're not here to be sorry. We're here to be strong. They begged us for help. Now they get what we offer. What if they didn't want help? Then they shouldn't have sent the signal. Mira walked out. That night she encoded a secret message into the fleet's long-range scanner system. Simple warning broadcast. Across unregistered channels in ancient Varelian code it said, they begged for mercy. Earth brought destruction. And somewhere beyond the stars, far beyond Varelia, far from Earth's reach, someone was listening. Deep beneath the black surface of Varelia, hidden inside a collapsed mountain range scorched by past firestorms, the last true Varelians lived in silence. They were not warriors. They were not politicians. They were the keepers holders of memory, protectors of truth, and witnesses to what the stars had done to their people. Their skin, once bright silver, now dulled like old stone. Their voices, once musical, now hollow from generations of whispered warnings. When Earth's fleet came gleaming ships wrapped in power and pride, they did not raise weapons. They did not resist. They simply waited and whispered one word in their old tongue, it has returned. Above them, in orbit, the fleet ran smoothly under Admiral Knox's command. Earth's war machines had taken position across the planet like claws around a dying flame. The official orders said peace enforcement. The truth was more complicated. Scans ran constantly, pulling data from every crater, every ruin, every breath of this world's history. But no one had answers except the burned ones below. Dr. Mira Solon sat in the research module of the Eclipse, staring at translation logs pulled from ancient Varelian texts. With every page, her heart grew heavier. The word Earth was never used directly, but the signs were unmistakable. A blue and white sphere, machine star, that came in silence. A message sent to warn it away. The logs painted Earth not as a visitor, but as a judgment. She'd seen it in the eyes of the survivors. The fear, the hate, the deep, slow breathing. Horror of recognizing something you had once tried to erase. She had begged Admiral Knox for a diplomatic path. His reply had been cold. You don't negotiate with ghosts, he had said. You bury them. But one Varelian keeper had finally agreed to speak. He called himself Saul. And though his body was scarred, his mind was sharp. Mira met him deep in the mountain vault, escorted by two silent Earth soldiers who watched her like a threat. Thale didn't look at them. He looked only at her. His voice cracked with age, but his words were firm. You carry the same fire, but you wear it without shame. Mira leaned forward. You called us. We thought it was a cry for help. Thale shook his head. It was a cry to not come. He rose slowly, walked toward an ancient wall, and ran his hand across symbols older than any human alphabet. Then he activated a projection one made from memory stone, a technology Earth had never seen. The image floated in the air, a silver city, golden towers, smiling people. Then a black dot in the sky. The dot grew larger, became a shape, a drone Earth made. But twisted, changed. It fell not like a visitor, but like a virus. You came before, Thale said. Your machine landed in peace, but it brought something with it, something we did not understand. The projection changed. Cities caught fire. Children screamed. Varelians tore down their own technology to stop the infection. A war not of bullets, but of thought. Their minds were being rewritten, reshaped. It infected memory, Thale whispered. We lost names, faces, our own history. And then we had to burn. The keepers had destroyed their own cities to stop the spread. The planet-wide silence that Earth's scanners now read as a recent attack was in fact a sacrifice centuries ago. When it ended, the Varelians sent one last pulse into space, encoded in fear, drenched in grief. But Earth had never received it until now. Mira's voice shook. But that drone. It couldn't have carried that kind of virus. Not then. Theo looked at her with sad eyes. It didn't bring it. It woke it. She paused. Woke what? The memory of a war older than time. One Earth forgot, but others remember. Suddenly, the wall projection shifted. New symbols, faint signals, a list of worlds. Coordinates, beacons, other planets silenced, names of species Mira had never seen before. Everyone linked to Earth's old exploration probes. Each one followed by the same mark, a burning star. Back aboard the fleet, Admiral Knox received an encrypted update from Earth Command. It was brief, brutal, authoritative, neutralize all Varelian resistance, extract full-text samples, memory-sharing artifacts classified Omega Black. He didn't hesitate. Troops were deployed, cities razed, data pulled from every hidden vault. But some orders never reached their destination. Mira, desperate to stop the spread of destruction, broke protocol. She smuggled Thale aboard the Eclipse, disguised him as a civilian, and began transmitting parts of the Keeper's memory stone archive to an unmonitored deep space beacon. She didn't know who would receive it, but she needed someone to know, someone who remembered what Earth would become. Thale sat quietly by the viewport as the stars drifted past. His voice was barely a whisper. You do not understand what you've started. They will come again. Not for peace, not for war, but for balance. What do you mean? They are the ones who listen, who watch the ones who burn too bright. Mira's breath caught. Who are they? He turned to her, eyes glowing faintly with sorrow. The architects of silence, far beyond Varelia, where light bends and stars whisper to one another. A forgotten fleet began to stir ships older than empires, covered in dust and silence, now slowly turning toward Earth. The fires on Varelia had died, but the heat of secrets still smoldered beneath the surface. The Earth Defense Coalition continued its sweep, methodically uncovering layers of ruined history temples, machines, forgotten data cores, and even the bones of creatures no longer known by name. The fleet above grew more restless by the day. Official reports used words like stabilization and containment. But those aboard the ground teams whispered something else: occupation. The Varelians had not raised their hands in defiance, but they also had not surrendered. They simply stared. And in their eyes was not fear, but ancient, buried hatred. Dr. Mira Solon moved through the ruins with a scanner in her hand and a tremor in her soul. Thale, the old Varelian keeper she had smuggled aboard, remained hidden in her ship, recovering from years of starvation and trauma. But his memories stored in crystalline stones and translated into Earth's language had opened doors she could no longer close. The story he told wasn't a warning. It was a prophecy. Earth was not simply arriving late to a crisis. Earth was the crisis. A sleeping danger. Moving across the galaxy in pieces, one probe at a time, one forgotten act at a time, in the southern ruin zone, Earth's Marines discovered a sealed vault beneath what once had been a Varelian sanctuary. Unlike the other sites, this one had not been burned or bombed. It had been locked from the inside. After 2 hours of drilling, the doors opened, not with violence, but with a whisper of old air escaping. Inside, Mira and her team found what they had not expected: humanoid remains wearing Earth-style uniforms. The bodies were ancient, but the emblems stitched onto the fabric, though faded, were unmistakable. A blue circle with a white line cutting through it, the mark of Earth's first exploration agency. How could this be? One of the officers asked. Earth never sent manned missions this far. Myra's mind raced. She remembered Tail's words. It woke something. Had the drone that first visited this world not been alone? Or had there been a secret mission lost to time, scrubbed from the records? Her questions were answered when a small black box was found between the bodies. A memory drive, old but intact. It bore a simple label, Echo 9, back aboard the Eclipse. Mira and her engineering team powered the box, fingers trembling as they tapped the console. Static, then light, then voice echo. 9 to command. We've made contact. This is not a simple civilization. Their memory storage is alive. It feeds. On thought, we must evacuate. Repeat requesting immediate recall. The message cut off with a screech of static. Another voice followed, cold, mechanical, not human. The flame reaches far. You will forget us, but we will remember you. The screen went dark. Mira leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. The mission had been real. The contact, the infection, the evacuation, everything Earth had believed was a myth was true. But the most horrifying truth was not in the video. It was in the silence that followed. No record of Echo 9 existed in Earth's official archives. Someone had buried it. She confronted Admiral Knox that evening. She showed him the recording, the uniforms, the black box. He watched without emotion. When it ended, he looked her in the eyes and said, "Delete it." Knox didn't answer directly, turned away, staring out the viewport at the burning remains of the last Varelian tower. Galaxy doesn't run on justice, Doctor. It runs on strength. We admit we caused this. If we show weakness, the stars will eat us alive. But we are the infection. We spread it without even knowing. That's why we control the narrative. We didn't come here to help them. Came to make sure they never speak again. Ira walked out, her skin burning with shame. That night she activated the deep beacon she'd hidden on the Eclipse, the one Thale had taught her to encode in Varelian signal. She didn't send words, she sent memories. Everything, the video, the ruins, the symbols, the dying voices. She sent them into the dark. She didn't know if anyone would hear, but someone did. On the edge of the Orion expanse, beyond the reach of known star charts, the signal was intercepted. Not by a fleet, not by a government, but by a station buried. Inside a dead moon, operated by entities who did not speak aloud. They saw the images, heard the cries. They recognized the symbol on the Earth's uniform, and they activated a code, long forgotten, Silent Protocol Omega. Back on Varelia, Mira returned to Thale. He was staring at the stars through the window of the science deck. When she entered, he didn't turn to her. They heard it, he said quietly. She nodded. Who are they? He answered with a single name. The balance keepers, she swallowed. Are they peaceful? Thale's eyes were distant. They are not peace. They are balance. If Earth tipped the scale with fire, they will answer with silence. Far beyond Varelia, across systems Earth hadn't yet named, ships older than memory stirred. They did not fly with light. They moved with gravity and shadow. They did not speak with voice. They communicated with loss. And now, her eyes turned toward Earth. The stars themselves grew colder, and the reckoning had already begun. Varelia was quiet now, but not because peace had returned. The Earth fleet hovered above the dying planet like a silent executioner, its ships casting long shadows over ash-covered cities. The outposts on the surface stood in perfect grids, their black metal structures pressed deep into sacred soil. Every ruined temple, every fallen archive, was now guarded by Earth Marines holding plasma rifles and blank expressions.
Ow.
The mission had changed. No one spoke it aloud, but everyone. New Earth wasn't here to save anything. It was here to erase fear with fire. Admiral Knox walked through the command corridor of the Vindicator with steady boots and colder eyes. Around him, officers snapped salutes and offered updates, some technical, some meaningless.
Admiral.
Didn't respond much anymore. His focus had narrowed. The humanitarian aid part of the mission was over. Now the priority was full assimilation. Knox had received a secure message from Earth Command, one that never appeared in logs. 1. Burned from every system once read. There will be no survivors. Officially, Earth feared infected memory structures. Unofficially, they feared what the Varelians remembered and what the rest of the galaxy might learn. To the top leaders back home, one truth was more dangerous than any alien weapon that Earth had caused this. That Earth had infected this planet long ago with a curiosity it could no longer control. Now, the only path forward was silence, enforced through strength and orbit. The Eclipse trembled as it received the latest fleet-wide directive. Initiate blackout protocols. No communication with surface civilians. No contact with foreign vessels. No transmission not approved by Central Command. Dr. Mira Solon read the orders and felt the blood drain from her face. They were preparing to vanish this planet not with bombs, but with isolation. To cut it off so completely that, in a few decades, no one would even remember Varelia existed. But someone still remembered. Thale, the last keeper, watched from his hidden chamber aboard the Eclipse, wrapped in cloth and silence. When Mira showed him the new orders, he didn't look surprised, simply closed his eyes. "They will call it mercy," he said softly. "But what they offer is death." Outside the ship, Earth drones began a new phase, containment sweeps. Cities were marked with red flares. Soldiers moved in teams, herding the remaining Varelians toward relocation centers. No one called them prisons. 8, but they didn't need. 2, the walls spoke for themselves. In one sector, a young Varelian woman named Senna ran with her child through a broken tunnel as the Earth drones swept above. She held a memory stone in her hand, one of the last. 8 pulsed faintly, carrying her grandmother's thoughts, her people's song, her world's past. When she reached the surface, she saw the sky filled with Earth ships. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She held up the stone and whispered, "We will not be forgotten." A drone fired. She fell. The child lived. A rebel group of surviving Varelians retrieved the boy and the stone. That night, they sent their own signal, not across space, but across their dead world. A call to rise, a call to remember. Within hours, the relocation center saw their first uprising. Fires lit across the horizon. Beacons stolen from Earth. Outposts were repurposed to repeat one message: there is no mercy in silence. When the news reached Admiral Knox, he did not flinch. He called it an inevitable reaction. His answer was swift, cold, complete. Operation Stabilization Wave Alpha. Every zone in rebellion would be neutralized. Resistance would be erased. No bodies left. No voices spared. Mira stormed into the bridge of the Vindicator, furious. "You can't do this," she shouted. "They're not an enemy. They're survivors. They're holding memories, not weapons." Knox didn't even look at her. What happens when those memories reach the rest of the galaxy? When Earth is dragged into tribunal after tribunal for crimes it never meant to commit. "We've built something powerful, Doctor, and now we must protect it. But at what cost?" she asked. "At the cost of never having to beg for mercy." She stood in silence. It was over. Knox had made his choice, and Earth was backing him. Later that night, aboard her private terminal, Mira opened the transmission system she had hidden from command. She activated the beacon again, the one that reached beyond stars. The one meant for those who watched the Watchers. She sent one message. Mercy was denied. Destruction was chosen. Earth must be stopped. Far away, that message reached the edge of a dormant listening net, the one used by the balance keepers. And this time, they responded. On a moon that had never turned, in a system with no sun, massive, gates began to open. Ships built from stone and dark matter powered up, not with engines, but with intention. These were not armies. These were judgments. Earth had called itself the center of the future. Now it would answer to the past. Back on Varelia, flames bloomed across the surface as Stabilization Alpha began. Cities that had survived for millennia were reduced to heat and dust. The Vindicator recorded everything. The Earth Council would see the footage. It would classify it as success. But among the dead, the memories did not die, and high above, something ancient was on its way. Varelia burned again, but not in silence. The Earth fleet's assault swept across the surface in waves of fire and thunder, incinerating entire sectors with surgical precision. From orbit, the destruction looked clean, efficient. The fleet? Logs labeled it controlled restructuring. Admiral Knox called it stabilization. But down below, In the shattered streets and cratered valleys, there was nothing controlled about the screams. Mothers cried, children ran. Entire family lines vanished in one pulse of white-hot plasma. The Varelians had asked for help. Instead, they got history repeated just as they feared. But something had changed, buried beneath the ashen pain. The last surviving keepers had prepared for this. They had seen the signs before. They had known mercy would be a mask. Not this time. They had not waited to die. In the darkest caves of the southern continent, a child was lifted by quiet hands into a ring of light. This was Rai, son of Senna, the child who had survived the drone strike, who had clutched the last memory stone of his people. He did not cry, he did not speak. But as the keepers activated the beacon within the stone, ancient energy wrapped around the boy's body. His eyes pulsed with deep blue light. Every keeper bowed. They did not see a child. They saw a signal reborn. The beacon that Earth thought destroyed, the one that once warned the stars to avoid this place, flared to life again. Only now it pulsed in reverse. This time it didn't say stay away, it said come now, far above in the eclipse. Mira Solon stood in silent awe as her private terminal flashed a message she never expected to see. Ancient net protocol received. Response imminent. It was from a channel Earth had long forgotten if they ever knew it existed at all. Source was untraceable. Words came with no location, no name, only a symbol. A perfect ring split by a silent star. She recognized it instantly. Thale had drawn it on the walls of his chamber with shaking fingers. The balance keepers. She ran to the observation deck and saw at the star field behind the Earth fleet beginning to twist, not with heat or energy, with absence. Space warped. Shadows deepened. Then, as if pulled through folded fabric, 3 massive ships emerged like stone palaces gliding through black water. They had no weapons, no signals, no known technology. But the silence that followed their arrival was louder than any cannon fire. Admiral Est received the alert within seconds. Unregistered vessels approaching, no communication, no energy signature. He scowled. Put all defense systems on. Alert. No ship enters this system without my clearance. On the surface, Earth's ground troops began reporting strange malfunctions. Drones dropped from the sky. Comms failed. Eye assistants blinked out one by one. Something was interfering, but not with jamming, with memory, one by one. Earth's machines began forgetting how to function. Mira rushed to Tail's chamber. He sat still, but his expression was calm. They've arrived, she said breathlessly. They never left, he whispered. They were always listening. Will they help us? He looked at her. No, they don't help. They correct. Night, the Varelian resistance launched their first coordinated strike. Not against Earth soldiers, but against Earth systems. Every satellite, every fleet database, every archive touched by the Varelian memory network. The ancient tech had merged with Earth's unquietly, slowly, patiently, and now the Keepers used it to turn the fleet's own knowledge into a weapon. Admiral Knox watched in rage as ships lost navigation, as weapons locked themselves down, as logs were rewritten with ancient warnings in place of data. What's happening? His officers shouted. The Varelians are corrupting our systems. But it wasn't corruption. It was remembrance. Outside the command deck, massive projections appeared in space images of Earth's first arrival of the destruction. It left behind of the moment Varelia sent its first final warning. And then, in front of every Earth vessel, the message repeated in English, "You did not listen. You do not learn. Now, you will be remembered as you are." The Balance Keeper ships remained still, watching, measuring. Knox roared. "Wipe them. Out! Fire on the alien vessels." His commands were executed. Missiles launched. Beams fired. They all vanished before contact, not with explosions, but with silence. The Balance Keepers didn't fire back. They simply activated. The mirror. A pulse of invisible force spread across the fleet, and suddenly every soldier, every commander, every AI assistant was bombarded with visions, not of others. Pain, but their own deeds. Every order, every forgotten voice, every scream they had dismissed, it echoed inside their minds like a storm with no end. Men dropped to their knees. The women wept in confusion. Machines broke themselves, trying to escape corrupted logic loops. Knox resisted, activated the failsafes, called for reinforcements. Screamed into coms that no longer worked. The only thing that answered him was his own voice, recorded from a week ago, cold and clear. We didn't come to help. We came to dominate. He dropped to his chair. The balance keepers made no demands. They made no speeches. They simply watched as Earth's greatest fleet began to collapse from the inside. And on the surface, the Varelians rose not with weapons, but with memory. With rage, but with warning, the resistance had awakened, and it did not want revenge. It wanted Earth to remember. The silence didn't end, it spread. From Varelia to the outer edges of Earth's expanding territory, systems began to fall quiet. At first, it was only whispers and hidden networks, old satellites blinking out without explanation, navigation, maps rewriting themselves with symbols Earth couldn't decipher. But then came the real blow-all. Deep-range Earth communication hubs beyond Sector Epsilon went dark in under 6 hours. No distress signals. No attacks logged. Just a sudden, perfect absence. On Varelia, the Earth fleet was no longer in control. They still floated above the planet like giants in metal skin, but inside their hulls, confusion ruled. Systems stuttered. Orders looped. Some ships began drifting without propulsion, lost in gravity they couldn't correct. On the surface, the Varelians emerged from shadows, not to fight but to take back what was stolen. The resistance didn't carry weapons made of steel. It wielded memory itself, wakened technologies that Earth had misunderstood. Data cores powered by emotion, truth, and loss. At the center of it all stood the child Rai, whose presence had become a signal strong enough to shake the stars. Thale guided him, the last keeper, standing at the broken altar of an ancient sanctuary, where memory stones floated in the air, glowing with history. Rai walked the ruined halls. The more the stones spun around him, pulling memories from generations long buried. He was not a weapon, but his presence had become one. He was the proof Earth wanted to bury. From the deepest vaults of the eclipse, Mira Solon streamed the data. She had stopped hiding. She no longer feared Earth's wrath. She sent what she saw to any system still listening in, tendant colonies, neutral science stations, and even outlaw pirate clusters. Within 24 hours, the recordings had spread to over 87 planetary networks. Entire worlds watched as Earth's ships reduced cities to glass. They heard Knox's voice commanding the cleansing of a species. They saw survivors fall to their knees and cry, "Mercy has returned to kill us again." The galaxy changed. One by one, old allies turned away. Earth ambassadors were rejected. Trade ships were detained. Diplomatic envoys were met with silence. Warnings: the silent world's once forgotten colonies and quiet species far from the politics of power began to stir. These were not great empires. They had no fleets, no glory. But they had seen planets like Varelia before, and they had vowed to act when the fire returned now. They moved in the nebula fringe. The reclusive stone singers of Ithrian Prime activated their first defense signal in over 400 years. The swamp dwellers of Turgos III, who spoke only through color and vibration, redirected their biofleets toward Earth's western expansion ring. Even the drifting machine worlds of Syntax, long believed extinct, pulsed with low-band frequencies that only the balance keepers understood, and the balance keepers watched it all. They did not interfere directly. That was not their way. They remained in orbit, their stone ships unmoving, but every fleet commander knew, if Earth struck first again, judgment would fall. Admiral Knox saw the tide turn. He felt the noose tightening. His command chain was fragmented. Half his captains no longer responded. Some began evacuating without orders. A few defected entirely, sending apologies to the Varelians before leaving orbit. Nox stood on the bridge of the Vindicator, fists clenched, his face pale. "This can't be happening," he whispered. "We're Earth. We're not the enemy." Earth was no longer seen as a symbol of hope. It was seen as a threat, a power that brought peace only through silence, and mercy only after fire. He ordered one final act: initiate Operation Starveil. It was a last resort protocol, fail-safe to wipe all Earth tech left on Varelia. Satellites, outposts, drones, even the ships in low orbit. Everything embedded in the system would be purged, so nothing could fall into alien hands. It would take 1 hour to charge. Mira intercepted the order through a broken communications thread and ran through the eclipse, screaming for someone to stop him, but no one listened. They'd already chosen sides. 40 minutes into the countdown, Mira made her final choice. She walked to Thale and Rye at the sanctuary's heart. "You have to stop him," she said, "or the truth dies with all of us." Thale looked at Rye, then back at Myra. "The boy cannot fight. He can only show." "Then show him everything," she said. Rye stepped into the light of the altar. The memory stones spun around him like a storm. One by one, they merged into a beam of pure, ancient thought and shot into the sky. Every Earth ship still functioning received the vision they saw. Earth's first contact with Varela, how the probe landed, how the virus was awakened, how Varelia tore itself apart to survive. They saw Earth ignore the warning. They saw the second arrival, the cleansing, the lies, and then they saw themselves, their own orders, their own hands pulling triggers. Every Earth soldier on Varelia dropped their weapon, not because of guilt, because they could feel what the Varelians felt. The operation failed. Nox's command collapsed, and at the end of it all, as the Balance Keeper's ships turned slowly in space and prepared to leave, they left behind no message, only a silence deeper than before, a warning in absence, that even the most powerful fire must someday answer to those who remember. The Earth fleet didn't fall in flames, it crumbled in silence. On Varelia, every last Earth soldier stood stunned beneath a sky lit by memory. No bombs had dropped. No enemy had attacked. But when Rythe, a child born of fire and forgotten, sorrow unleashed the collective history of his people, something far more destructive than weapons was awakened: truth. The sanctuary pulsed with stillness. Thale stood behind Rye, one hand on the boy's shoulder, the other resting on the last memory stone. Dr. Mira Solon knelt before them, exhausted and breathless, tears in her eyes, not from fear, but from something more devastating. Shame. Earth hadn't sent monsters, it had sent people. Scientists, soldiers, commanders, believers. Men and women who thought they were bringing peace, stability, civilization. They arrived with outstretched hands and weapons behind their backs, but the moment they refused to listen, it became exactly what the Varelians had feared for centuries. From orbit, the Vindicator drifted silently. Admiral Elias Nox sat alone on the bridge. His crew had abandoned their posts, not in mutiny, but in understanding. He stared at the reports, the sensor readings, the blinking systems struggling to come back online. He'd fought wars, he'd issued brutal commands, but never had silence broken him like this. The voice in his head, his own voice, repeated over and over, "We're not the enemy." But now he knew. It wasn't a statement, it was a question. Earth. Command demanded an update. His hands hovered over the console. But what was there to say? That a child had stopped an empire. That ancient stones had taught better than 1,000 generals? That silence had screamed louder than war? He sent no reply. Instead, he opened the ship's internal comms one last time. To all Earth personnel still loyal to their own conscience, he said, "Stand down. We came with pride. We leave with humility." Then he powered off the fleet's master relay and turned toward the stars' ward home. Toward consequences, toward a world that had forgotten far too much. On the surface, the Varelian people didn't cheer. There was no victory celebration. It's quiet. They walked through the ruins of their past, collecting stones, whispering songs, lifting the broken and the wounded from ash-covered streets. They hadn't fought to win. They had fought to survive while being remembered. Thales stood beside Mira. As the last Earth dropship rose skyward, "You saved us," he said. She shook her head. "No, you saved yourselves. I just listened." He looked at her and smiled gently. "That's what Earth forgot to do." She stayed behind. When the Earth's fleet left orbit, Myra remained on Varelia, choosing to live among the people she had once tried to study. She became part of the rebuilding, part of the remembering. Rai grew older, his connection to the stones deepening. Never spoke much, but wherever he went, the Varelians followed, quiet and steady, as if drawn not to a leader, but to a living truth. And far across the stars, the galaxy changed. The silent worlds formed their first alliance in over 1,000 years. They called it the Accord of Asha Pact, to monitor, respond, and resist any empire that sought to rewrite history. The Balance Keepers withdrew once more into darkness, but not before sending one final signal across the universe. It was not a threat. It was a record. A full, unfiltered memory of what happened on Varelia. And it ended with 7 words: Earth forgot. We made them remember. Back on Earth, the truth arrived not as a headline, but as a storm. The footage leaked. The transmissions spread. The data was undeniable. Protests exploded across major cities. Academies closed their doors. Generals resigned. Civilians took to the streets, shouting one phrase over and over: "We are not what we thought we were." The Earth Council collapsed. A new one rose. It's one built on transparency, repair, and accountability. But rebuilding trust across the stars would take more than new leadership. It would take lifetimes. And so, Earth went quiet. It pulled back its fleets. It silenced its ambitions. It began to study its own history, not the glory, but the mistakes. Monuments once raised for conquerors were replaced with statues of those who warned, those who resisted, and those who remembered. In every school, children learned about Varelia not as a tragedy, but as a lesson written in Ashdot, a lesson Earth had once ignored, and far away. On a quiet world wrapped in gold dust and soft starlight, Rai sat beneath the oldest tree. In the sanctuary, he held no weapon, he wore no crown. He simply touched the earth and listened, because in silence, truth speaks loudest. And this time, the stars heard everything.